Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market IT consulting companies. Most IT marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. We help them measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with their budget, and finally get executive recognition. And you can learn more at condoragency.com. And today we want to welcome Kathleen McQuade, who has over 2 decades of experience in marketing with a focus not only in the tech space, but in particular in life sciences, which is a heavily regulated space, which has its own challenges, and we'll be talking through that today. So welcome, Kate, and please, complete that intro that I just made.
No, you did a great job, and I'm so grateful to be here. So thank you for having me, Carlos.
Of course. So the challenges around the regulatory space, I guess, in particular, we're talking especially around biotech, around medicine, right? Kate, what, anything else there that you want to, before jumping in the details, right? But would you want to give a little more of context on what type of regulatory space we're going to talk about?
Sure. Yeah. With life sciences, and that's, as you mentioned, it's pharmaceuticals, it's med devices, biotech. There's one of the most heavily regulated spaces that we have. And so a lot of that comes down from the DOJ. And in the US, we have the ECCP guidance that came out last year and then was kind of doubled down on by the FCC this year. And those are basically just talking about transparency and how to both protect privacy when you're talking, as well as to be transparent in what you're conveying. Because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with life sciences, it's really about the patient care and about making sure that they're safe and that they're getting the information that they need. So the companies, when you zoom back up, they have to be doing their part to make sure that they're following along and saying things that they're supposed to be saying. And of course, depends on where you are globally. There's different regulations. So, you go to Europe, there's the GDPR. That also has to do with the way that you communicate and when you can solicit somebody, what you can say, what you can't say. And you don't have to go far in a Google search just to see the different fines that are kind of handed down month after month. And they're pretty hefty. I mean, they go into the billions of dollars. And in some cases, the trillions of dollars. Last year's, it was, I think, $1.4 trillion that was passed on in fines. So you see those in the financial market as well as you see them in the life sciences. And it's really a fine line there to make sure that people are following those guidances and making sure that they're, adhering to those regulations that are there, because ultimately they're there to keep everybody safe and to make sure that the information out there is reliable and honest, and making sure that people are, dotting their I's and crossing their T's.
And I'm sure, the people that have worked in that space, where that's, being part of on the client side, or as in my case, with an agency that, did work for a client that is in a space that is heavily regulated, I'm sure that they feel very represented in the topics that we're going to discuss. But how for the ones that haven't, right? Can you walk this a little bit? Because let's say, there are a lot of even outside of the regulatory space, communication, collaboration, it's already a challenge, right? Make sure that your branding is consistent and your messaging is consistent, let alone for a company that has presence internationally. That's already a challenge, right? But could you explain for those who haven't been in this space before the difference, right? The bureaucracy, the constant meetings and approvals from lawyers, right? So they could really understand, how different of a world is it, and how much more challenging it makes it.
Sure. Yeah. It's when you're thinking about life sciences, you really want to think about an ultra conservative, slow paced, slow to adopt environment. as far as technology goes. And what I mean by that is not that they're not being innovative and coming up with amazing things. It's just the way that they're communicated is definitely very meticulously combed through. And think about it this way. If you're a B2C company and you are selling a couch and you are a customer and you're looking for that, you can just automatically talk to those people by a phone call or send a text message if they have that capability. Ask for a sample guide. They can send that right over. They can send it back. It's really between the salesperson and the customer. Easy peasy, right? Well, that's not the case in life sciences. It's most of the time it's B2B, or it's, you know, say it's a pharma rep to an HCP. If they're asking for information like, hey, am I able to give ABC drug to this, you know, pediatric patient? They need to be able to say, be compliant with what's been approved to say, no, it's not been approved for pediatrics. It's only for geriatrics. There's very specific language that you're allowed to use when you're dealing with life sciences, and rightfully so. It's because if you give someone a medication or approve it or use a medical device that it hasn't been approved for in an inconsistent manner that hasn't been approved by the FDA or other regulatory bodies, then it can cause serious damage or worse. So it makes sense that there's a lot more regulation on it. It just makes things much slower to kind of move through, and kind of like running in a field of syrup. I mean, it's just a little bit more slow going. There's a lot of extra steps you have to take to make sure that you're communicating properly while you follow those rules. So it can be kind of cumbersome, and that's why you need technology and help and tools to kind of navigate through that a little bit easier.
And how do you balance, you know, the two things, right? On one hand, I think in marketing, if you don't have that inherent ability to push things forward, right, you're not going to be a successful marketer in general. And again, outside of a heavily regulated space, I always try to err on the side of pushing things forward, moving fast, being, you know, not being afraid to test new things and fail and learn quickly. But obviously, as you mentioned, you know, the rules and the regulations are there for a reason. So you also have to be a little more cautious, right? But how exactly do you balance that? I'm really interested in what you mentioned at the end of, you know, how do you use technology for that end?
Yeah, so there's two things at work here when you're dealing with life sciences. There's internally where they're testing drugs or they're doing clinical trials or those types of pieces that the public facing doesn't necessarily see. And so those communications back and forth while they're doing important scientific work is happening, you know, at its own pace. For us, who is a tech company, P360, we deal in the life science spaces, but we can still be innovative, agile, and we can still be adaptable and scalable because we complement and we help and enable that compliance in those life sciences. So our technology helps us to kind of bridge that gap with that communication to make sure that they're communicating properly. So our flagship product, which is called ZING, it's an engagement suite. It basically lets you communicate just as you would on a video call, like a Zoom meeting. It lets you do text messaging that are compliant and all tracked for compliance oversight, lets you have wet signatures, form capture. All of that is done in an environment that is frictionless for the HCP and lets you have that log where the compliance, the lawyers can have that oversight and come over and say, okay, was everything said that was supposed to be said? Did they step outside the lines of saying something that they shouldn't say? Or did they violate any, you know, rules or regulations with Sunshine Act? Or did they overstep their bounds in any way, shape, or form? So having a tool that helps people to be able to be compliant is really the sweet space that our tech company operates in, because we're here to help navigate that space and make it more compliant and make that data make sense as they're navigating it, as opposed to us having to actually be the pharmaceutical companies trying to deal with those messaging straight to the patients. That's a whole different area of marketing that has that forward facing with the regulations on a different level. And
how has the product been received, and who has been more excited about it? Is it the, you know, the front end user? Is it the lawyers? Is it the executives? Is it, you know, a little bit of everyone? Or
Yeah, so great question. So we right now we're currently with 4 of the top 10 pharmas, about to be a 5th one. That's globally, as well as a number of small and medium-sized pharmaceutical companies and a med device company. And those have been really well received. We've seen really good adoption rate with those. Compliance loves us. The lawyers really love the oversight capabilities of it. They really want to implement us. So they're always on our side. The sales team, sales reps, they love it once they get explained to it. Of course, they're in a routine. So, sometimes they're like, okay, what's this new thing you want us to do? So they're probably the most pushback on there, but executive teams love it. They see the ROI there. That's very fast. The compliance loves us. The commercial team, of course, once they see how easy it is to implement, we get a lot of good feedback on that front too. So all around, it's been pretty good. As far as the welcoming open door for our products. It's just kind of getting the foot in the door when you're out there trying to let people know who you are.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And now in terms of leading a team, and what we're talking about, both collaboration and also, let's say, branding consistency. What are some learnings or some advice that you can share, obviously in particular in this heavily regulated space?
Sure. Yeah, I think that collaboration is key, and I think that is key internally and externally. I think that any company, and I don't care if you're 10 people or 10,000 people, if you're not talking to the people that you work with or the people on your team and really listening to them and listening to their ideas and what they have to say, then you're doing yourself and ultimately your products a disservice. So people from HR might have a great idea while they're brushing their teeth and bring it to the table, and it might be something we can expand upon. Or somebody who's not familiar with the development of a product and they're looking at a roadmap, they might find a bug that somebody else wasn't looking for. So it's really important to kind of have those conversations and keep that going so that you can learn from them about what they're saying. And especially those sales team or people going out to conferences or different meet and greets or talking to people, because they'll hear those questions in real time, and to be able to feed those back in so where you can kind of absorb them and learn from them and adjust your messaging as you need to. And that internal kind of process of communication and talking internally really needs to translate to the external world as well. Because once you put your message out there, you want to make sure that you're telling a complete story, that you can kind of carry somebody through that journey. And of course, it looks a little bit different if you're coming to me from compliance or if you're coming to me from sales. You're going to have something that you're more interested in, right? The tech people always want to know, like, how big of a headache is it going to be for me to implement it? Like, what do I need to do for that? What is it going to be for the maintenance of it? As opposed to the sales want to know, like, okay, what's that going to mean to our bottom line? What is it going to mean to our sales or territory alignment or what have you? So even though the messaging might be a little bit different in the beginning or even part of the journey, you want to make sure that you're taking them on that consistent messaging to kind of get them the information that they have to make that decision ultimately at the end. And over time, we've seen a shift over the last couple decades where now it's over 90% of the information that a buyer needs has already been discovered online before they actually reach out to a salesperson and talk to them. So they're going to your website, they're reading the blogs, they're talking to people, they're reading your reviews, they're going to your social media, they're doing all that fact finding before they get to you. So you really need to be powerful in that storytelling from a whole omni-channel approach to make sure that your message is consistent no matter where the people are seeing it, whether it's a conference or LinkedIn or Instagram or email campaign or however you decide to approach that based on what you're selling. But having that collaborative message out there and get that feedback, I think you got to keep rinsing and repeating and make sure that you're folding it in.
So I think there are two areas, right? The first one that you mentioned was more about collecting intelligence from your organization and also from outside of the organization, from the departments that have contact, with your current and prospective clients, right? So it sounds very logic, but at the same time, it's easier said than done.
Right.
I manage a team of, let's say, 40 people, and at that scale, which is, smaller scale compared to, you guys right now, and way less regulated. It's just a marketing agency, right? And and for me, it's hard to keep a pulse of that in a way that is efficient without throwing, meetings on everyone's calendars. And then how do you summarize all of the feedback and channel that and turn it into adjustments, let's say in your machine, that evolves your business forward, right? Do you have any
Right.
advice on how to go about that to be both efficient and effective?
So I think the biggest piece of advice is keep talking and keep listening, because one of my colleagues, their 25-year-old version of themselves versus their 30-year-old version of themselves are going to want two different things. They're going to have a different perspective, whether it's on a product or their job satisfaction or whatever that looks like, because of just life events and also experience and things they've been exposed to. So really having those conversations and keeping them moving is so, so important. And arguably that should take up the bulk of your day, is interacting with people, is really talking to people and listening. That soft skill of listening and having empathy for people that are on your team is only going to make you stronger as a leader and as a team, and you're going to produce better products from it, because you need that satisfaction, that empathy to be able to pull through and really do the best job that you can have. So that listening to it. Now the bigger challenge, as you mentioned, the team of 40 people, just the sheer number of those people. So P360 right now is a little over 300 people. So that is a massive amount. So I don't pretend to talk to 300 people in a day. I mean, that would be madness. But I have a team of people that I talk to every single day. And those people are talking to other people. And I have other people that are talking to other people. And so you really do need to value those team leads and making sure that they're doing that same rinse and repeat, and everybody's on the same page, that you need to talk to these people and find out what's important to them, or what ideas are there that they can come to you, or anonymously, let you know that feedback, so that you can constantly be getting that information and taking that into account. Because otherwise you're not operating with a full deck here. You don't have all the insights that you need to make the best decision moving forward and to be able to ebb and flow. Because you and I both know marketing, the exciting part about it is that it's always changing. So what worked 6 months ago is not going to work 6 months from now. So if you don't have that information and you're constantly evolving and changing it, then you could definitely make some mistakes.
So yeah, so it's more of a values and mindset approach than just a magic bullet of a process that you can install.
Yeah, I think so. I really think that there's no one way that's going to solve it for everybody, and not only is things evolving and different things are going to work at different times, but also, your product's going to change, or what you're trying to sell, or different feature sets, or different platforms that come out and might be more applicable to a different product or another client that you may have. So to be able to be flexible and constantly taking information and making sure that you're evaluating those, or having a team member evaluating those and then giving you the highlights, I think is really going to set yourself apart and make sure that you stand out above, your competitors.
Would you say that the same concept applies on that second area, which is more of, okay, once you have the right message, right, how do you make sure that it's consistent, that it's aligned, that all of the departments are speaking the same way, that in the degree of control that is possible, that you also know what the world is saying about your brand, right? How about on that end, is also a little more processes involved, or still more of a day-to-day push and more of a mindset than anything else?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that you're constantly collecting data and using those analytics to your benefit. I mean, we live in a day and age of, we've got a lot of really awesome AI tools that can do some of that work for you. You have your CRM tools that you can spin up so that you're getting feedback from that, and you're seeing who's engaging with things, whether it's a social media ad or an email campaign. You can take that data and kind of collect that and make the technology work for you to help you with some of that feature set. But I think that that's going to help you as far as what's working and what's hitting. But also you need to kind of get out there, and you need to have those interactions. You need to have those conversations with customers and with potential customers and with your targets, so that you can really understand their feedback and see if the message that you're telling is landing on them, or if you're starting to hear the same questions being asked. Because if you're starting to hear the same questions, then you need to put that in kind of in your dialogue. Internally, I think that there's such a need for you to have not only a brand guide from just a aesthetic standpoint, but also a brand, like a description guide, so that this is the message this year of how we're going to talk about P360. This is how we're going to talk about ZING, our flagship product. This is how we're going to talk about Bird's Eye for data and analytics products. And not that you expect everybody to read and spit it out verbatim, because that, nobody's a bunch of robots and everybody needs to have their own style and some freedom with it. But you want people to have a baseline of like, okay, I remember these 3 bullet points. I can draw from those. These are the real highlights that I really need to focus on. And that really helps that message to be consistent, no matter who's talking, no matter if they're at a conference or if they're standing in line at Starbucks and they're asked about, what they do or what the company does. They can really kind of drive those messages home, and hopefully with their own personal flair on it, you kind of have that message be as consistent as you possibly can. You can't take out that human element, and I don't think you want to, because that's not real life,
Yeah. And another challenge that is very common in marketing is to bridge that gap between the executive team, the board of advisors, and the day-to-day marketing team, right? And in the case of the space that we're discussing, it's such a heavily regulated space, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that the executive team embraced the limitations and the bureaucracy a long time ago, and they decided that that's the space they're in, right? And they don't, fight it anymore. Versus, the marketing team is probably a younger team. They come with new energy of innovate and being more creative, and it can be very frustrating to them to run into those barriers and limitations that a lot of times they feel that they don't have to be so bureaucratic, but ultimately it is what it is, and even change there takes time, right? So that's even another challenge, right? To foster a connection between the executives and the day-to-day marketing team, right? So how accurate is my guess, number one, and then most importantly, what advice do you have? Because from what we were discussing before the podcast, that's an area that you put a lot of effort throughout your career, and I think I know you have some valuable advice there.
Yeah, well, so I think you're not wrong. Definitely, you can have people with a different ideology of how experimental or how much they want to push the envelope. And then you can have people that are a little bit more stuck in their ways. We're really lucky at P360 that our 2 owners, Ed Vaz and Anupam Nandwana, are extremely open-minded and really want to think outside the box and very creative. Another great thing about them is that they're very much open door, so that it doesn't matter if it's your first day and you're working in sorting mail. It doesn't matter. You can still reach out to them and they will have a conversation and be open and honest and take those ideas. So I think that idea and that culture has really permeated throughout the entire company, that everyone really tries to be as open and willing to collaborate and really understand people from different departments, even if they don't have any background in marketing or any background in development. The people will still hear your idea and they'll take that into consideration. So I really think that the team really makes up the company, and we see that where I am now at P360, and it just radiates throughout everybody to work together and really come in to hone in on that innovation. I see it every day in our development team. They're working on things that won't even come to market for another year or 2. They're just the things on the roadmap are just mind-blowing. But I also see it in, the marketing team, of course. There's so much creativity there, and just really, really talented individuals that are being cultivated, their skills and the experience being just amplified. And I just see it across the board. So really having that kind of push and pull and openness, I think, helps make that environment just work together. And I know I'm really lucky to be able to be in that situation, because not everybody has that.
Yeah, it's not common. But it's fair to say that the companies that, you mentioned Lucky, I'm sure, it's also intentful, right? From the leadership team to be that way. And they know that it's either that or they're gonna slowly be the competition is gonna get them eventually.
Right.
Kate, and another area that it's common, especially nowadays after COVID in marketing, is collaborating with teams outside of the US. And that could be, for example, for developers, and especially in the IT world, India has been, let's say, it's been present for a while now. Now, in the development area, Eastern Europe, also becoming a hotspot for developers. And in marketing, also besides India, there's the Philippines, or in our case, for example, there's Latin America. And I know you've had experience working with offshore teams. Can you walk us through how have you seen how that world has evolved over the last few years, and then any advice also on how to build a great competitive marketing team?
Sure. Yeah. So as far as where we are with P360, we're a global company. So we actually have a presence in 4 different continents. So the US, in India, as well as in Luxembourg, and then also in Australia. So we are a global company. And I think that it makes sense because our customers are global as well. So I think it's worked really well for us to be able to collaborate, not only around the clock as our clients need us, but also to make sure that we're coming at it from a different angles. Because my experience just as an individual, not just as an individual American, but as an individual, is going to be different than your experience or somebody else's experience. So you're kind of having that from all different walks of life, I think just brings value to the team, and helps to bring a more well-rounded approach so that you can kind of see things from all different angles, or at least hopefully you can. So I really find a lot of value in that, working with teams from all over. P360 has always been a remote company. So even before COVID, when people were kind of forced to go remote, this was just, it's another Tuesday when people started going remote for P360. It's just, carry on. I personally, in my career, I did see, of course, that shift to changes with remote versus office work. As well as teams starting to work globally. So I've seen that throughout my career. It's never impacted me in a way that hasn't been positive, because I always look at it as a way of, that's a chance for you to just learn from somebody at a different angle. And I don't care if they live down the street or if they live, halfway across the world. It's just, another opportunity to learn from me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree. For us, we were remote before COVID, right? So I didn't go crazy, at that, first half of 2020 when COVID hit and everybody started working from home. I was already used to it.
Yeah.
But I think we are in the minority in that sense. But I think now it's also the minority of the even US based companies that don't have a presence outside of the US. It's every day it's less and less companies that work like that. So yeah.
Right. And actually, and speaking on that too, even if they're not direct employees, we even have contractors that are in other parts of the world. When we move into a different country or different territory, a lot of times we'll get an advisor in that area to just let us know the lay of the land. Maybe things are called a little bit differently there. Maybe we're calling them, patients, and they consider them clients, or, just some little nuance that we want to make sure that we're getting right, because so that we can, make sure that we're giving them the best experience. And it shouldn't have anything to do with them being in a new country we haven't been in before. It's really just about learning more and making sure that we're open to that and we're being innovative and adaptable, which is one of the perks of being a smaller business.
Yeah. And in this one, I think, as you mentioned, when you were gathering feedback and intelligence, it's more of a mindset than anything else. Yeah, there are project management tools that you definitely can use, but ultimately is the will to make it work, to embrace it, and to also see the positives out of it, right? Accessing a global talent pool, also learning, and the let's say the perks that come from that. Maybe you get to travel and visit those places, but if not, you get to definitely know people that you didn't have those connections before.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think also that's a huge point to hit on too, because it's not just people globally, but we're, the day and age that we live in, there's so many incredible technologies. I mean, AI is obviously the most obvious one, but there's so many incredible technologies that are really evolving right before our eyes. And so the opportunity to get to learn that and kind of stay on top of that and see the way it's being used, good, bad, or indifferent, or hey, that kind of fell flat on its face, or let's try to use it for this. I think it's just a really beautiful place to be in, to kind of keep your mind open. And that's what, at the end of the day, the marketers love to do, is just learn new things and, figure out how you can talk about your product more and figure out how you can tell that story more. So it's an exciting time to be able to kind of muddle through that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. As you mentioned, right? For a company that has presence internationally, it's even more important to embrace that the fact that your team, it's outside of the US.
Right.
Kate, before we finish, anything else that we haven't discussed that you think would benefit our audience, that you share with them?
Well, I think the most important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about marketing is just to do that, to keep an open mind. Because you can always learn something new. You can always learn about your competitors. You can always see what somebody in a different vertical is doing and kind of take inspiration from that. And I think that once you keep that open mind and just kind of keep yourself free from those burdens of, I have to do things a certain way, I think it's going to make you a better marketer. It's going to make you a better leader, and it's going to drive your business farther.
And also, I feel that I'm like that in general. It's also, I think, being willing to push that mindset to the rest of your team, that might be a little quicker to give up, in certain instances. I don't know if that has happened to you, but I found myself in that situation, and I think the team has. At the beginning, there might have been some resistance, but ultimately, I think especially at an individual basis, they understand the importance of doing that, because it's ultimately the only way that you can, drive your team and the business that you work for forward.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, there's thousands, tens of thousands of examples of just negativity breeding negativity and positivity breeding positivity. And I really think having that positive frame of mind is just contagious. And I think that it creates such a better culture to work in. Happier people produce better products. It just makes it more enjoyable. I mean, it doesn't mean that every day is going to be a good day, but it means that the majority of your days you can pick out the good in those days and you can amplify upon that. And I think it just spreads like wildfire, and it makes you as a team and you as a company more successful.
Well, it's been really refreshing, to hear, your way of thinking, especially coming from such a challenging space, especially in that area. So thank you, Kate, for coming. I guess one last question, I almost forgot, but I always like to ask one, if there is either a book that you recommend that changed the way you thought, or also a mentor that helped you see things differently, or that meant a lot, particular a piece of advice or any of that you can share.
Sure. Actually, I had a mentor. His name was Peter Layler. Sadly, we lost him in 2020 due to cancer. But he was a business mentor of mine, and he was just an incredible person. Him and his wife, Debbie, we befriended them. They had sons that were older than my sons, but the same age gap with them. So similar life experiences. And he just had such a brilliant mind. He traveled the world. He would never met a stranger, very open-minded, always positive, and just really found every challenge to just be a learning opportunity. So he really inspired me to just, take the next step further and just kind of keep pushing on no matter what adversity that you face. And he really kind of helped shape the way that I look at business and at life.
So it's not 100% self-learn, you know. You
Yeah.
always need people, you know, to look up to and to also to push you, because it's not that easy.
Yeah, that's true. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you so much for being in the podcast and sharing your experience with us. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, Carlos. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.